All right, so we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Amy Kuth, and I'm a patient educator with the Stephen and Barbara Slaggie Family Cancer Education Center at Mayo Clinic, and I will be the one moderating this session. This is part 4 of our 5-part Cancer and Spiritual Wellbeing webinar series. The topic for today's webinar is resentments and forgiveness. We want people on this webinar to know that this session is being recorded so that individuals who are not able to join us today for the live session can watch it later. For those who would like to view this webinar again, the recording takes about 3 days to be edited and put on the video library tab of our cancer education page on Mayo Clinic Connect. Mayo Clinic Connect, for those that aren't familiar, is a digital platform where patients, family members, and caregivers can connect, get evidence-based information, and get access to information about classes and webinars that our center offers. So we encourage you to follow our cancer education blog on Mayo Clinic Connect so that you can stay up to date on our education opportunities. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to our cancer education blog in the chat, and I will do that right now. You should see that coming across here. All right, so we will take questions at the end of our session today. If you have questions related to this webinar topic, please type them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can do that during the presentation, or you can save your question to the very end and type it in then. But we will save the Q&A section until the very end. I will now hand it over to Tim Yoder, who is a chaplain here at Mayo Clinic, who will be giving the presentation today. Take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Amy. I'm very glad to be here with you guys today and to discuss this topic, which can be a very deep and broad topic. We're just going to touch on a few areas of it today. I just want to say that it's always been a universal aspect of human experience to go through hurts and resentment. And if you look back at history and you look at many of the world's spiritualities and religions, many of them have a big focus on forgiveness and things related to that. I was able to study in Jerusalem as a college student, and that city is alive and bustling and busy and horns honking and people chattering. And on the Day of Atonement, which is a day that recognizes that need for forgiveness, the entire city goes silent and there's no traffic, there's no cars, no sound. And it's just a very powerful day for Jewish people. And I think if you look at most religions, they will have similar things and rituals that help them. So we're going to talk today about resentment first and what that is and what that looks like. And then we'll talk about forgiveness and different ways to conceive that and think about that. And then we'll move into maybe some practical steps on how to move from resentment to forgiveness if that is something that you choose to do. It's also important to note that we can have resentments towards ourselves. We can have resentments towards our higher power or God. And of course, we can have resentments towards other people. And so just keep that in mind as you're listening to this presentation today. And I just would invite you to think about your own life and maybe something sticks out to you of something that you might want to think about a little more and address. So this is called the hurricane of resentment. And resentment is a word that means essentially to refeel. So you'll see here that we have this cycle that happens. We have an event that happens. And this event is usually, it can be all sorts of different things. Someone intentionally hurts you. Someone whispers behind your back and you overhear it. Someone doesn't intend to hurt you, but they say something that does. If it's related to yourself, it could be a time in your life where you didn't act out of your best self. You violated a value that you have, or it's just something that you really resent that happened to you or really hate that happened in your life. And so that can stick with you inside and really affect you a lot. So these events, they create emotional pain, hurt. And there are some events that don't cause this to linger, but what we're talking about today is resentment, which is this lingering hurt that happens. And this hurt could have all sorts of emotions associated with it. Uh, Fear, anger. Sometimes when we're hurt, we feel guilty as if it was our fault, or we might have a really big desire to get even or have vengeance. There might be shame or sadness as well. But as time goes by, a trigger might happen to us, something that reminds us of the event. And when that happens, if we have this resentment, we comes right back around to the hurt and those emotions that we feel. So when we talk about addressing this in our life and we use this term resentment and forgiveness, the forgiveness is designed to come in right here. So we can't turn back time and make the event not happen. We can't totally address all of our triggers. Some of them, it's uncontrollable to address all the triggers. But what we want to do is when we remember the event, lessen the hurt. So that's what forgiveness in this presentation is intended to address. So if that word forgiveness is difficult for you, you could put things in there like letting go or release or acceptance, other words that might be able to help you grasp that part. And when we think about resentment, often it's something that we feel like we got to clutch onto and hold on to. And maybe there's a good reason for that. I think resentment has a biological component to us. So it's our brain's way of warning us something has happened to us that's hurtful, right? And so it's a way of our brain trying to protect us. So maybe let's just entertain the idea that maybe we want to keep it around. So what would resentment do for us if we wanted to continue in resentment? We might feel safe. So when we have resentment, it's a clear thing. You can put a huge boundary down and you can try to make sure that you're safe. It might feel good. So sometimes when we're hurt and it's a clear injustice to us, in some way, shape, or form, we might feel like we're on the right side of things morally. And sometimes even when we tell someone the story of how we were hurt, that telling that story, we get compassion and kindness from someone. And at some level, we notice that, and then we may repeat telling that story to get more compassion and kindness from people. So it might become part of how we connect with others. Another thing about holding on to resentment is that your sense of justice is there, right? It's not affected, and you don't have to feel like you're compromising in some ways. Another thing is that you might be able to avoid thinking about it. So with that hurricane going around, for some people, there's maybe 10 resentments. There might be, more. And that spinning, that hurricane might be really occupying a lot of your time and energy, or it might not be. And so sometimes part of holding on to resentment is maybe you're not thinking about that hurt as much anymore, and that it's insulating you in some way from really feeling what happened to you. I think we'll go over here to the con side now. So it has been noted in some research that, that physical and mental health problems are kind of linked with holding on to resentments. And so there's been things like blood pressure and other sleeplessness, insomnia, other things. It's not conclusive. A lot of that research, of course, is really hard to prove in a really deep way, but it does seem like there is some associations there. Another thing about keeping a resentment around might be that you're more guarded in other relationships in your life, and that might impact your ability to stay close to someone. And in some ways, the resentment might make you more preoccupied about the past. So you might be dwelling on it more often. And when we do that, we kind of lose the ability to be present. Others talk about how if that is happening to you, whether you're thinking about this hurt a lot, that you're kind of letting that event or that person or that thing have power over your life, and you're extending that out. There's I think, a Buddhist story about a person who he's angry at someone and he drinks poison to try to hurt that person. And as you hear that story, you know that that doesn't make any sense, right? But that's kind of what's happening. We hold on to resentments sometimes, and it has no effect whatsoever on that other person. It's only kind of hurting ourselves. Okay, so sometimes there's these myths around forgiveness, or some ways that thinking about it that might not help us too much. And there's that whole forgive and forget classic cliche, and that might work for small things. But if we're talking about substantial hurts in our lives, trying to forget or avoiding it is usually only a temporary band-aid to the situation. Um, Another thing forgiveness isn't is minimizing or justifying what happened, or pretending or excusing the behavior. So we can forgive someone and want to move forward while still acknowledging that what they did was wrong and hurtful to us. So sometimes it's hard to see that when you're in that hurt. We tend to think more black and white about things, but we can still say that this was not okay, but we can still move forward and work on reducing those feelings of distress that we have. Another piece of this that sometimes gets confused is the idea of reconciliation. So we can forgive someone and never want to see them again. Maybe that person just isn't safe for us. We know that they're going to repeat those behaviors. Um, and the form of forgiveness that we have to use in those circumstances is for ourselves. And maybe we wish that person well. We don't want any harm to come to them, but we know that just having interaction with them is never going to be the same again. And of course, there's levels to that too. So sometimes there's a breach of trust. Maybe we can't tell that person those secrets or those things in our hearts the way we used to, but we can still be with them on social occasions or other things. So there's a lot of nuance to the reconciliation, and there could be another whole topic on how to reconcile. But forgiveness can happen for you on your own. It doesn't have to involve those other people. Um, Yeah, it's not about telling another person. It certainly can involve that, but it's really, like I said, if you're feeling like you get lost in this or stuck and you're not making progress, you can always think about, why am I doing this? If I decide to do this, why? It's usually to reduce those distressing feelings and the thinking about it all the time. And so really just using different techniques and skills and people and resources to help yourself in that way doesn't necessarily have to involve talking to that other person. And forgiveness is not a way to try to change them, right? So if we offer to forgive someone else, we can't expect them to change, right? We don't have control over that. And again, that's where the reconciliation versus forgiveness comes in. Reconciliation involves at least some bit of recognition on that other person's part that they want to change and that they did wrong you. You can forgive someone with them without ever admitting that they did something wrong, right? So reconciliation is kind of more of a two-way street. It takes a little bit more work and time to build trust back up. Some people feel like, oh, if I do this, it feels so weak to me. It feels like I'm caving on my values. But I really don't think it is. I think that actually um, one of the ways we can be there's a religious sentiment out there that says we're most like God when we're forgiving, and because that's the most difficult thing for humans to do in some ways. So it's not really a sign of weakness to work on forgiveness. It's actually a sign of great, great strength. And forgiveness sometimes, for some of us, it can be an attempt to fix. So some of us rush to forgive others too quickly. Some of us think that once they say, I forgive you, or something like that, or you forgive me, and they say yes, that just makes everything perfect. And it doesn't. This is all a process. So forgiveness is a continual process that we go through, and there will be ups and downs to it. Um, it's not like a light switch that just you turn off and on. It's kind of a journey that we go on, not necessarily something that is just quickly fixed. So what are just some of the elements of forgiveness? It's a free choice. So we've got to be able to make this choice freely and when we're ready. Okay. So if there is some part of you that is willing to try, that's a good place to start. You don't have to be 100% ready to try, but maybe you just want to experiment with these feelings a little bit to try to move forward. Okay. But anytime there's a little bit of coercion or force, or you really feel like sometimes families will do this, like if you're fighting with a sibling, your parents might, like when I was growing up, I was forced to hug them, right? And pretend everything was okay or move forward a little bit like that. Uh, so sometimes things like that happen, just well-meaning, and people want things to be better, right? So, um, but that's not really the best way to start with this. Is we got to come to it willingly. It's also just a gift to yourself. So again, if you feel stuck, if you're picturing that other person and those emotions all come up, try to focus more on caring for yourself and helping yourself and being a friend to yourself. And that especially goes if you're trying to forgive yourself and working on that. Um, there's also a famous quotation about attitude and how much that impacts our lives and how there's so much that's out of our control. But that attitude and intention in our attitude can really make a big difference for us. Um, and there are many situations that we can make worse because of our attitude. So um, it's important to think about that in this topic because of our emotions are a very high state often when we're hurt or resentful. Sometimes it can be, and of course, it's an act of respect to ourselves, and many spiritualities or religions talk about the inherent value of each person, the human dignity, and often we find it easy to extend that to others and harder for ourselves. It's important to think about that as forgiveness as a way to respect yourself and who you are and your integrity. But it can also be a gift to others, depending on how you do it and what's the situation is. It is a great gift to other people to either provide forgiveness or ask for it in certain circumstances. Okay. So what are some steps that if we're thinking we do want to work on this, what are some steps we could take? Well, first it would be to start small. Anytime there's something great or big or challenging in life, um, it can feel overwhelming. And that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. In fact, it's probably the opposite. It's probably a great thing to work on. And but the way to do it is to break it down into small pieces. So how could you break forgiveness down? Well, it might be that you start to become okay with small victories or to do the next right thing to help you. So when the emotions are really high around resentment, maybe at that time you would pray or meditate or do something kind for yourself just to soothe those thoughts. But other times it might mean focusing instead on gratitude and trying to find what you're thankful for. And we can take these little moments can make a big difference in our lives. Um, Another first step might be if you find it hard to think about going down this path, find other stories of people that have forgiven. And there are some heroic, amazing stories of people that have forgiven much. And you could turn to your religion as well. There's many stories in sacred scriptures that talk about forgiveness. Or maybe your goal is like just to not think or dwell upon it so much. Maybe you ruminate on it, right? So maybe we just try to notice that and try to release that each day. Okay. Um, Acknowledging the event. Now that's a big one, and that is probably these aren't in any particular order, but acknowledging the event is a big piece of this. So sometimes we are we're so in that fight or flight mentality around resentments that it's hard for us to actually kind of look at things deeper. And this goes with the next piece here. So if you were to have break your ankle, um, would you decide that some people do this, but just put a band-aid on it and walk it off, right? Well, that's not really going to address the whole issue, correct? And often one of the first steps that a doctor would do would be to take an x-ray. And so that might be involved for our emotional wounds, journaling or talking to a friend about what's happened. Just because if we don't ever look at what happened in a wise or calmed state, we might not ever be able to fully understand how to heal. We also have to give ourselves permission to feel these things. Oftentimes, I know sometimes in my religious tradition and background, anger was kind of seen as a emotion I should never have. And so it became easy for me to deny anger or to think I'm not feeling it. Um, and also with resentment, there can be these surface feelings we have, but there's really deeper ones underneath. And so just allowing yourself to feel them, even though they're scary, is an important part in the healing process. We can also take action. So little things, volunteering or writing in a gratitude journal or other things like that, small things can really make a big difference. Okay. It's important to not discount those small things. And sometimes the actions that we need to take might be more on the comfort side, so more to support us and soothe us and help us. And other times it might be more something that's going to challenge us or make us feel a little vulnerable. But so rest, meditation, exercise, those might be things that are more on that comfort side. Volunteering or supporting others that are going through things might be more of a challenge to us. But, and then reach out to others or your faith community. We don't have to go through these things alone. Sometimes it feels embarrassing or we have shame around having resentment in our lives. We keep it to ourselves. But we don't really have to go through these things alone. And everyone to some degree struggles with these things. So reach out to someone who you trust who will be open and listen, a family or friends, or a clergy person, a religious leader, a therapist. They can all help. There's groups out there too that can help. It's important to not try to handle this on your own. And then start over. So emotions come and go, and that's a big part of what resentment is. And so there may be times where we have to start again and start small again. And those shouldn't be like big shocks that happens. It should be, yep, I knew this was coming and I'm going to keep addressing it. So it's easy for it to feel demoralizing when that happens, but it is part of what it means to be human and have emotions and to live life and to take risks and be hurt. Those things happen. So I really appreciate you being here today, and I think we're getting ready here to turn to any questions that you might have.
Great. Well, thank you, Tim, for that wonderful presentation with lots of great information. I really appreciated the framework that you gave, especially at the beginning with the hurricane of resentment
Sure.
and some practical tips that you gave along the way as well.
Yeah.
So we'll pause for just a minute here and kind of allow people to type in any questions that they have. As a reminder, you can do that by using the Q&A function. That'll be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So you can just click on that, type in your question, press send, and then I will receive it on my end. So let me take a look here. Let's see. So Tim, you talked about a little bit about the some of the cons of resentment, that it can have some negative health effects. Curious in terms of forgiveness, have they done any research, or do you know of any research that shows of any beneficial health effects for somebody that chooses to forgive?
Yeah, I don't think they've directly, that I know of, done research on the forgiveness piece. I have heard people talk about gratitude almost being the opposite of resentment, and they have done a lot of research on people that are grateful. I know that they did a big study about some Catholic sisters and nuns and how long they live, and a lot of it was related to their gratitude journals that they were keeping and things like that. And that's an interesting question. I think there's probably a lot of room left for us to kind of consider that more. Um, yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but uh, yeah, I mean, we in the chaplain office, we have done some research on people who have cancer and how that changes their lives, and a lot of times it is related to this issue that it puts something into clarity for them in a way, and they were able to make some big changes and choices that really helped them. So we had some interviews that we went through with people, and that was a recurring theme, was this kind of
Mhm.
reconnection with people, or letting go of some of those things in the past.
Great, thank you.
Hmm.
Let's see here. This person is wondering about how can I approach forgiving myself? And so they talk a little bit about so having negative feelings related to their cancer diagnosis. They say, although I've been told I didn't do anything to cause my cancer, I can't help but think that if I made different choices in my life, I could have prevented it. So, what are
Sure.
some strategies for forgiving yourself?
Yeah, so I would say if you're interested, there is this website, selfcompassion.org, that talks a lot about this issue. It's well researched. Dr. Kristen Neff is one of the head researchers with that. But she has an exercise where you think about yourself as if a friend. So in that scenario, would I ever say if would I ever say to my friend, I think you probably caused your cancer, and if you would have just made better choices in life, you wouldn't have this issue, right? No, of course we wouldn't say that. And sometimes what happens with ourselves is we have distorted thinking about a scenario or a situation, or we're extra judgmental towards ourselves. And when we compare it to how we would speak to a friend in a similar circumstance, that kind of puts that into clarity for us. Now, that's just one little example. There are many, many more on that website. Um, and some people will use their religious beliefs or spirituality. So, what in their religious reference, what does the divine being say about each person? Well, they're valuable, they're important, they have worth, and they're created. Um, so there are other things too to try, like in, engaging with your spiritual side again, or but I think just in general, trying to be more gentle with yourself and accept that some of these things in life we cannot change. We can't change the fact that we have cancer, and how do we move forward with that and be compassionate to ourselves in that.
Great. Thank you for the resource, selfcompassion.org.
Yep.
Okay, I wrote that down.
Okay.
um, I really like that idea of sort of treating yourself like you would treat a friend. It seems like such a simple concept, but I bet it's
Yeah.
pretty hard to put into practice because
Yes.
we're
Yeah.
always our own worst critics, of course. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And we're constantly in dialogue with ourselves. So, we might have a critical person in our life, but we can find ways to get escape from them. Well, when when those thoughts and that conversation is in our own mind, it is extra hard and it's extra challenging to address them and make meaningful change there, I think.
great, thank you. Tim, are there any other resources that you would recommend for our audience today in terms of addressing resentments and forgiveness?
I think there is a mail resource to a pamphlet. So if you're on site, they do have a forgiveness booklet that you can get from Mayo Clinic. Um, but I don't have anything else in mind. Usually, I would meet with someone individually and try to understand a little more their circumstance, and then maybe I would have something more tailored to them. But there is a book too called "Why Won't You Apologize?" Um, and that book addresses it from a different angle, but it helps us understand what a good apology is and um, and why that doesn't work sometimes. But
Great,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions at this time. Let me just double check our Q&A. Nope, I don't see anything else in there. So with that, I think we will go ahead and close up our session for today. So I would like to say thank you to everybody that showed up and participated today. You can click on the link that I shared in the chat to learn more about upcoming classes and webinars that we are offering, and also to review this recording once it is posted in our video library on that cancer education page. And then when this webinar has ended, you will be prompted to take a quick survey. We really appreciate your willingness to fill out this survey as your feedback is super helpful to us to ensure that we're offering educational opportunities that are valuable to you. So with that, I will say thank you and have a great rest of your day.